It's time! Happy end of year to our alumni UBC family. Happy holidays! Hello, friendly alumni. You've once again returned to From Here Forward, the informative, funny UBC Podcast Network podcast. We are your girls, Carol and Jeevan.
I'm back and better than ever, and I have to say I'm loving that vocal performance from you, Carol.
Thanks. It's my audition to a Broadway show. Perhaps the next Wicked 3, featuring Carol. Who's to say? And we've got a special guest with us. Jeevan, drumroll, please. The one, the only, our producer, Kylé.
Thank you. I am so honored to be joining you today.
Very formal. We are so happy to have you. It is so exciting to have Kylé on this side of the mic today. And we have a really fun episode to wrap up 2024. After a year of amazing guests and more corny jokes from Carol than I ever needed to hear, we're going to be taking you through some of our personal favorite moments of all time on From Here Forward.
It's a little annual throwback, if you will, a year in review. So Kylé, why don't we start off with your best of?
All right. I'm going to take us to a moment of inspiration in light of the holidays. One of my favorite episodes that we did in 2024 was Bashar. He was so fantastic.
Yeah, I thought that learning about his approach to thinking about climate globally was so interesting. And I think one thing that really stuck out for me was just how passionate he was. It left me feeling really hopeful about the future, even though a lot of the stuff we were talking about was really heavy. It was just a nice sort of reframing of the way we look at the climate crisis globally.
And I loved that he used film to talk about really important things because, to be honest, I have no attention span anymore. So watching something and learning something, iconic behavior.
Carol, you do realize you're saying this as a member of an audio show, right?
You know, semantics.
Well, here's a clip from Bashar talking about what he does. And just as a little promo, I would encourage you guys to check out his film. You still can, and we'll throw it up in the links.
After moving to Vancouver, I just saw how disconnected people are from the realities of the global south. And I was very lucky to be able to go to COP, the United Nations Climate Change Conference that happens every year as a part of the UBC delegation in Egypt in 2022. And I think that really made me realize that a lot of these climate leaders or a lot of the political leaders, businessmen, the reason they were putting their self-interest in the first place was because they didn't really realize how it's impacting the lives of people. I'm sure if the CEO of Shell spent a month in the southern coast of Bangladesh with a family who's a climate refugee struggling to go from one place to another, not knowing what meal to eat next, I'm sure Shell would change its tides and they would recognize what their action mean for these people so far away from the realities that they live in. And the only way to bridge that gap is through empathy and is through storytelling. I went back home the next year, did some traveling across the country with my bike just to learn about what climate change really meant for my people, and then went to the next COP and premiered the documentary film that we made.
My next couple picks, I have to admit, I'm going outside of 2024 a little bit. I'm hitting back into 2023, which I don't know if I'm allowed to break the rules, but I make the rules as a producer, so I think I can. I learned so much from all of our guests, but one of the ones that really stood out to me was Dr. Stephen Narod talking about his genetic discoveries. And just as a young-ish woman, it actually informed decisions that I have made since. So here's a little bit of wisdom from Dr. Narod.
This was probably one of the bigger gene discoveries in the past few decades. There was a recent report in Nature magazine that of all of the genes in the genome, that BRCA1 and BRCA2 were two of the four genes which were most likely to influence a woman's lifespan, a mutation. However, we spent research over the past 20 years trying to figure out ways that will reduce that risk. We started this work back in 1987, and that led us to identify the position of the gene BRCA1, which was on chromosome 17. That happened in 1994, and a year later, we identified BRCA2. Shortly after that, it became possible to do genetic testing for women and for men to see whether or not they carried the mutation in the gene. And about 1 in 500 women in Canada will have a mutation in one of those two genes. There are also the genes that cause both breast and ovarian cancer. So there's a dual function here that we have to correct in order to reduce or eliminate the risk of breast cancer and ovarian cancer.
Early detection is an extremely important part of breast cancer research because it may mean less treatment, less recovery time, and even a better chance at survival. Now, people all around the world can get a genetic test to determine if they're at an increased risk for breast cancer and hopefully receive early treatment. Science is pretty cool, kids.
To that end, we developed at Women's College Hospital a program called the Screen Project, where anybody in Canada, men or women, regardless of their family history, can get a genetic test by going online to the Screen Project at Women's College Hospital. For ovarian cancer, we do have some prevention, which would be oral contraceptives reduce the risk of ovarian cancer almost in half if you take it for 5 years.
Not to make this about me, but were you just as shocked to hear that oral contraceptives can reduce risks of ovarian cancer?
Oh, definitely. I was shocked to learn just how much it can prevent it. Reducing risk by almost half with consistent use feels like something I definitely should have known before. I also took more steps towards preventative screening measures after that episode. And so it was really nice talking to someone who has really devoted his life to such instrumental medical discoveries. And I think that the importance of the work that he's done throughout his career, you can't understate it. Carol, do you have any thoughts?
Just go get it screened is my takeaway. Anyway, next one.
All right. My last pick of some of my best of episodes also was a bit of a knowledge is power situation. Dr. Lori Daniels was amazing, a wildfire expert. And as somebody who lives in British Columbia, and unfortunately, wildfires are now part of our lives, learning from her gave me hope. Just understanding some of the causes and how we've ended up here made it just so it's not a dark cloud. It reduced my fear in some ways. The more you know. So here's a little snippet of wisdom from Dr. Daniels.
Here's the important thing for us to remember. There's multiple factors that are contributing to this wildfire emergency we find ourselves in. Climate change is the umbrella over top, but underneath is the condition of the forest. And we know enough about how our forests used to function, how they are functioning today, and the difference between those. We know the susceptibility has to do with our choices about wildfire management and forest management. And so we can change the way that we are managing the forest. We can change the forest to make it more resilient to fire. And then we can use multiple tools in our toolbox. We're learning by listening carefully and working with Indigenous communities about how cultural fire stewardship used to maintain landscape like this, and how we can combine Western science with Indigenous knowledge to reintroduce fire back onto lands around Indigenous communities and more broadly on their traditional territories to increase fire resilience. So that's another way in which we've been very innovative and transdisciplinary.
Thank you so much for sharing all of those, Kylé. Awesome to hear what your favorite ones were from the last year and a bit. It's your time to shine, Carol. What are in your best of?
So you probably thought that mine would be our Gen Z dating app Early, but nay. My best of was our interview with Dax Da Silva, who is the CEO of Lightspeed Commerce and founder of Environmental Alliance Age of Union. It was all about the environmental conservatism and his great work on the ground, which is crazy because I don't know if you know this, but Lightspeed is everywhere.
Yeah, I had never noticed Lightspeed anywhere, and now I see it on all of these payment machines, and then I'm like, great. He's getting my money, he came up with something good, and then he's using it to make the world better. Like, hopeful. Very hopeful that this exists. Thank you, Dax Da Silva. We're fans.
You mentioned how the capital that was raised from Lightspeed went on to kind of fund Age of Union. We're curious about your passion for conservation. Where did it begin? And can you talk a bit about why conservation is so important for the planet?
So the conservation piece was really important to me as a kid. So my parents were refugees from Uganda. When they came and settled in Vancouver, my sister and I grew up in Vancouver. And, the inexpensive activity that everybody in BC did was go camping. And so because of that, I was exposed to, just these stunning British Columbia naturescapes and, fell in love with animals, fell in love with nature. And when they started clear cutting the coastal temperate rainforests off the coast of Vancouver Island, 1,000-year-old trees, were being cut in places like Clayoquot Sound, I joined those protests. You know, I was 17, me and my stepbrother, we took my Mustang and we drove across the island and joined the protest. Zipporah Berman leading an international protest. She was only 23, and I've actually gotten to Zipporah Berman presented me with my arts degree when I finally graduated this fall. So that came full circle too for me, which was amazing. And she's such an incredible activist. Unbelievable. So I was 17. She was 23. She took over this protest because everybody else had been thrown in jail. Over 900 people were jailed during the Clayoquot Sound protests. It was called the War of the Woods. She turned it into an international outcry, and we saved Clayoquot Sound. And so that was like my first foray into activism. And we actually were able to protect this whole place, large place, Pacific Rim National Park, for future generations. And I've revisited many times. And I think I've only begun to realize in later visits what we were able to accomplish and how precious that is, that we were able to save that. But I think what really turned me into an activist was the drive across Vancouver Island to get to Clayoquot Sound when I was 17, because I drove through hours and hours of clear-cut moonscape. And I just thought about all of the animals and just ancient thickets of forest and hillsides that used to exist there. And I think that's what really turned me into a lifetime conservationist. And I think that juxtaposed with what we were able to save, it showed us, first of all, how destructive we can be as humans. But it also showed us what a single individual, Zipporah Berman, and a collective outcry can actually do. And so, I was well on my way to, my Steve Jobs dream of having my own software company that had already started since I was a 13-year-old. But at 17, I already knew that this was going to be a longer term goal that I came back to when I had the experience and the resources to do something about it. I have tracked the environmental movement and the conservation movement very closely. All those years I was building Lightspeed and thinking about how I could bring something new to the table when I was able to build something like Age of Union.
My second best of is indeed the early episode. And I have to preface that I felt called to say that this was one of my top 3 because it's cuffing season, baby. It's cuffing season. It is time. The time is now. And I just feel like Connor and his team through UBC, I just feel like they need the support, from all of us single people. And yes, I'm not really part of the demographic, as I learned in our conversation. But I will say, it was really interesting talking to Connor about his app, because I didn't realize that the younger generation actually wants to date people. But now we're like, the youths want to find love via the internet? Wild. Well, what did you guys think about that episode?
Yeah, I think that episode was for the yearners. It was for the lover boys and the lover girls. As much as it was unpacking why we need more tools to help the yearners find the people in their life. So hearing that there's someone at UBC who's working on something different and kind of innovative was comforting, a little hopeful too.
Hopeful, she says, about love.
She's trying. The months are getting colder.
Are you saying that you're a yearner?
Absolutely.
Perhaps you should start using the app then, because you are at least within the age range. I have too much skepticism. I'm too old, but it is cool because it shows that UBC is doing cool things. A lot of young people are really being innovative. The young people are using the tech to create the thing that they feel is missing in their love lives. And I have to say, while that doesn't really work with me, I respect and support it. 50 times better is quite the statement. So generally people do hate these apps, but what specifically are the gaps that Early is addressing?
I think the biggest thing is it's really hard to start a conversation on Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge. Hinge does an okay job with their prompts, but really, what are you going to say to someone on Tinder when they don't have a bio and it's just a few pictures, right? It's very hard to gauge someone's personality and interest. So there's crazy statistics, 90% of matches don't even send a first message on Tinder, right? Which is really, really bad. And then if you look even deeper, 57% of the messages sent on Tinder are one message conversations. So you send out as hey, and they just never hit you back. And ultimately we're thinking why is this? And we basically rebuilt a dating profile from scratch to figure out ways that we could get people more engaged in learning about the other people. So basically what we've done is we've built in these game mechanisms that help you uncover more about your match's personality through guessing about them. For example, one of our favorite games is called Hot Takes. And how it works is, let's say you set up a profile like Carol or Jeevan. You answer a few questions about yourself and what your takes are about controversial topics, like do you split the bill on the first date type of thing, right? And then I'd go on your profile and I'd basically guess what I think you'd answer. So like, let's say, you come onto my profile and it says, does Connor split the bill on the first date, right? And you say like, yes. And my answer was, no, I don't. And I'll pay for it. And then that just starts the conversation. Basically, like, it gives you like so much more about the person versus just like, a prompt where they have to, their friend could have written it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a really more authentic way to learn about the person. And I think when you look at the legacy dating platforms like eHarmony, like Plenty of Fish, things like that, like they had a lot of depth, but no offense to them, not taking shots at our competitors, but they're pretty boring, right? It's like, you're going to read someone's CV if you want to date them? Probably not, right? But building out an engaging platform with a little bit more depth is basically what we're trying to do.
Love it.
So wait, Carol, both your picks are tech. Are you a tech bro? Do you love a tech bro?
I like the salary of a tech bro.
Ooh, don't we all? My number one comment about that episode is no episode has made me feel older, but also really highlighting cool UBC programs. And I thought that was pretty great.
The holidays are all about donations. As a perfect segue, Jeevan, what are your picks?
Okay, so I'm going to start us off by taking us back to the summer when we talked to Dr. Pennefather about UBC acquiring Shakespeare's first folio. That conversation was so fun, particularly because of how creative and just like cool Dr. Pennefather was. I especially loved his comments about making literature more interactive and sort of the like new digital media opportunities for different kinds of like older texts. So here's a bit more from him about that.
Again, alumni from the Master of Digital Media program. So strong UBC connection, which I loved. How can we recreate Shakespeare and thinking of this scene and the characters in VR? And what's going to be interesting to people? Should we just tell the story again? And the answer was no. Unequivocally no, because we wanted to be creating some type of immersive and responsive environment. So what we did was everyone is a ghost. You come in multiplayer, 15 people at a time. You put on your headset. You are all assembled as ghosts. And what you need to do, and it's a little dramatic irony, like when we know what the story is already and we're like, he did it, man. We know Macbeth did it. No, he did it. But the job of the ghost is to uncover clues to help the other characters realize that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are responsible. So that involved triggering sounds to wake up the porter, because there's a porter at the beginning of that scene, and you hear knocking at the door, and it's Macduff, and he's knocking, and the porter won't let him in because he's sleeping, and he keeps coming up with excuses. It's a brilliant comedic turn in that play, and so we thought, okay, we need to help Macduff wake up the porter. Oh my God. Suddenly you have something immersive. Suddenly you're placing the players, the humans, giving them that responsibility to wake up the porter, to get the scene going. So really we had the scenes as is, no recreation. It was the script as it is, but the scene could not move forward without the help of the audience. The audience is transformed, right? It's no longer a passive audience. It's an audience that is engaged. They can speak to each other. It was absolute chaos, and people loved it. So that's an example of how I've been rethinking with others, right? How do we create more immersive experiences of Shakespeare?
I liked him and I liked his energy and I learned a lot, and it was kind of traumatizing reliving my English major days, but we love a little Shakespeare moment. Okay, anyway, on to the next one, Jeevan. What's yours?
Okay, so a little bit more somber, especially now that we're post-US election, but our conversation with Paul Quirk was very illuminating. I think Carol and I were both overwhelmed with the amount of information about the US election on our feeds. And there was something about our conversation with Paul that helped me feel like I had more tools to understand what was going on. And the words that he spoke to us about how Canadian democracy may be impacted by the results of the US election, which we all know now how it's gone, rang in my head for days after the election. Carol, what did you think?
You know, it's weird because obviously I know words like democracy, but I felt like he actually like added to those words instead of just being buzzwords, and it kind of created like a very intense moment where I was like, oh, like this isn't just theory we're talking about anymore. This isn't just a paragraph in the textbook. This is a thing that's actually going to happen while I'm alive. So I think that's what shook me with that conversation. Like, it's going to be different this time in a way that we've never seen before. So love that.
So yeah, let's hear more from Paul about that. You know, Canada's about to enter an election cycle of its own as well. And, you know, the state of democracy in Canada. How might this election impact Canadian politics or Canadian democratic rights, if at all?
The most important thing here about democracy in Canada is that if Trump and Republicans win the election and it doesn't lead toward a serious erosion of democracy in the United States, what that would mean more concretely is that the United States would have elections in the near future in which there was so much pressure on electoral management systems, on the administration of elections, and so much facilitation of cheating, possibly intimidation of people who don't cooperate, using the powers of government, so that there would be elections that really weren't, there would still be elections, but they would not really be competitive because of the degree to which the sums on the scales were favoring Republicans. And then a government in power due to those things, right? So the thing that I think is most relevant about this is that authoritarian governments don't like neighbors that have actual democracy. The leading examples of that are Russia and China, both of which have authoritarian systems, have been very concerned to try to prevent dissatisfaction within their own countries and pressure for democracy within their own countries by finding ways to harm other countries that had democracy. I think it's actually quite realistic to say that in the worst case scenario where the United States has highly compromised democracy or even mostly authoritarian system with basically bogus elections in the near future, the governments put in place by that means would put pressure on Canadians, find ways to make it difficult for democratic parties in Canada, find ways to prefer parties that strayed from democratic practices and move toward authoritarian practices. So I think there is a risk to Canada. There's another kind of risk which is less dramatic, and that is just the risk of imitation. That is, if looks like you can persuade the public to reelect you in the United States after taking actions to try to steal an election, a party in Canada could infer the same thing might be possible in Canada just by means of imitation. I have no basis for making any accusation that any party in Canada has been influenced by that kind of reasoning, but it is a possibility. But I think maybe the more important one is that an authoritarian United States would be hostile to democracy in Canada.
And then my last pick is something a little lighter. It was our collab episode with the Alumni Wine Club, where Carol and I got to taste some awesome wine from Moon Cursor. And I just had so much fun. One, learning more about all the different ways that UBC is involved with wine really broadly, but also just getting to chat with Carol and like joke around over a glass of wine was really, really fun. So yeah, let's hear a little snippet from our silly conversation that day. Now, I'm not a super avid wine drinker, but I hear Carol is something of a connoisseur.
I am what the youths call a millennial cliche. I love hashtag wine o'clock, hashtag wine down with wine.
Hashtag rosé all day, I'm guessing too.
Oh yeah, all day, every day. See, this is proof that Gen Zs are justified in their constant bullyment of millennials. I sort of backtrack. I am no connoisseur. I'm simply a woman who loves routine in the form of a Chianti or any other red blend.
I have yet to be schooled. I'm looking to my millennial sister to teach me a little more, but it's tasting pretty good. It's light. It's doing what I need it to do on a Saturday afternoon.
So in today's episode, we teamed up with our friends in the alumni UBC ecosystem, including the Land and Food Systems faculty and the Alumni UBC Wine Club.
And much to my surprise, UBC is actually really into wine in more ways than one.
Yeah, I mean, UBC has winemaking classes, world-renowned research, a wine library, occasional events with industry experts, and so much more. So in addition to talking about these beautiful Mooncrusher wines that we're drinking, more on that later, we've included some expert voices from a recent panel on how UBC and BC winemakers are dealing with the ongoing climate crisis. All of which we're going to dive in today's episode with some support from fellow UBC alumni and wine experts.
Now, for those of you who, like Carol and I, were in the dark about the club existing in the first place, Alumni UBC Wine Club is a free club for, you guessed it, UBC alumni to get exclusive access to wines from Okanagan wineries. Each quarter, the club partners with wineries in the region that are owned and operated by UBC alumni themselves, offering exclusive pricing and bundles that you can opt into with club membership.
With a strong emphasis on education, members have access to tons of information about the wines and the story of the UBC alumni who came to build careers in the industry. Things like tasting notes, industry insights, and so much more.
For this quarter, Alumni UBC partnered with Mooncrusher Vineyards, which is the reason Carol and I have the pleasure of drinking on the job today.
It wasn't silly, it was authentic. It was genuine.
Genuine?
Mm-hmm.
They're still selling cool BC wines, so you guys should hit those up for your holiday gifting and drinking. But also, I was very jealous. I did not get to drink the wine. So my memories of this episode, to be frank, are mixed.
Valid. Very valid. I hear you.
But so that's great. We love a little season wrap up. And I think it's really important to do a performance review for From Here Forward to really end the season with a bang, if you will. So Jeevan, are you ready for a performance review from your producer, Kylé, and from your amazing co-host, myself?
Yes, and I'm definitely not terrified.
I'm going to give it to our older millennial to start it off.
I genuinely wish that eye rolls were audible so you could have heard mine. I want to do your performance review, Carol. JK. Jeevan, you are the nicer host, hands down.
You know, I may be the nicer host, but Carol is definitely the funnier host.
Thank you. I agree. I mean, I don't really have too many notes other than you speak very eloquently and in a way that you rein me in ways that sometimes I don't know if you need to, but sometimes I do feel you need to. And it's great. But it's been great speaking with you and being part of a younger crowd, if you will. I learn a lot from you and about your youth. So it's been great. 9 out of 10 from me.
Okay, that was lovely. But I'm going to flip it back on both of you. It's time for a little performance review. So maybe let's start with Carol. Carol, you bring a sense of levity that I sometimes need. And I think that it is so fun and appreciated. You make these conversations so much fun and so interesting. So it's been so fun being here this year. I genuinely love this so much. So thanks for having me, guys.
And that's enough emotions. So thanks to all of our listeners. It's been an incredible year of speaking and learning from our incredible alumni UBC family. Jeevan and I wouldn't be doing this amazing work without your support. So please subscribe and leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts. From the deepest depths of my frosty little heart, thank you for your love.
Seconding all of that, and also reminding you that if you've missed any episodes from this year, this is the perfect time to go back and check them out. And links to all the episodes that we shouted out today are in our show notes.
Make sure you catch our next episode in the new year by subscribing or following our show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm going to say this really nicely because it's the holidays. Please drop us a nice review. I'm no longer on X or Twitter, whatever you still want to call it, but you can find me on Blue Sky at Carol Eugene Park. It is way more fun to be on that part of the internet.
I have not moved to Blue Sky yet, but Carol's making a strong case for it. So for now, you can still find me on Twitter at Jeevan K. Sangha. From Here Forward is an alumni UBC podcast produced by Podium Podcast Company.